The morning that changed Olivia Chen's life forever started like any other Tuesday. The 16-year-old woke up to the familiar smell of her father's coffee and the soft sound of his humming coming from their kitchen downstairs. But by sunset, that same kitchen would be filled with strangers in dark suits, speaking in hushed voices, while Olivia sat frozen on the stairs, unable to believe her father would never come home again. David Chen, beloved high school music teacher and Olivia's biggest supporter, had suffered a sudden heart attack during his afternoon choir practice. The students had called 911 immediately, but by the time the ambulance arrived, it was too late. The doctors said he didn't suffer, but that thought brought little comfort to Olivia or her mother, Sarah. The days that followed moved in slow motion. Olivia watched as their modest Seattle home filled with relatives she barely knew and neighbors bringing casseroles she couldn't eat. Her mother, usually so put together in her lawyer suits and perfect makeup, moved through the house like a ghost, making phone calls and handling arrangements with mechanical precision. Your father's student sent another card, Sarah said one morning, placing a handmade card on the kitchen counter. Olivia didn't respond. The pile of sympathy cards had grown so large that they had to move them from the coffee table to a box in the corner. Each one felt like another reminder that her father was really gone. Nights became the hardest part. Before, Olivia and her father would spend evenings in their small music room, where he'd teach her new piano pieces or listen to her practice. Now, the room stood silent, his reading glasses still perched on top of sheet music he never finished teaching her. The baby grand piano, once the heart of their home, collected dust as Olivia couldn't bring herself to touch the keys. At school, everyone walked on eggshells around her. Teachers gave her extended deadlines she didn't ask for, and friends stopped inviting her to lunch, unsure of what to say. Even her best friend Jenny's attempts at normal conversation felt forced. "We could go to the mall this weekend," Jenny would suggest carefully, as if shopping could somehow fix the huge hole in Olivia's life. The art room became her only refuge. While other students ate lunch in the cafeteria, Olivia would slip into the empty classroom, pulling out her sketchbook. Her drawings, once full of color and life, turned dark and messy. Mr. Parker, the art teacher, never commented on the change but quietly left new charcoal sticks on her desk when she ran out. Sarah threw herself into work, taking on extra cases at her law firm. Some nights, Olivia would wake up at 2 a.m. to find her mother still at the dining table, surrounded by legal papers, the soft glow of her laptop illuminating her tired face. They barely spoke anymore, both trapped in their own versions of grief. One evening, while searching for a clean glass in the kitchen, Olivia found one of her father's coffee mugs pushed to the back of the cupboard. It was his favorite, a chipped blue ceramic mug with music notes painted around the rim. She'd given it to him for Father's Day 3 years ago. The sight of it made her knees buckle, and she slid down against the kitchen cabinets, holding the mug to her chest as tears came without warning. That's how her mother found her an hour later, curled up on the kitchen floor, clutching the coffee mug. For a moment, Sarah stood in the doorway, briefcase still in hand, looking lost. Then, for the first time since the funeral, she sat down next to Olivia and pulled her daughter close. They stayed there until the sun set, sharing their first real moment of connection in weeks. But the next morning, Sarah was back to her coping mechanism of endless work, and Olivia retreated further into herself. The house felt too big, too quiet, too full of memories. She stopped eating regular meals, picked at her food when she did eat, and spent hours staring at old family photos on her phone. Her grades started slipping. The straightest student who once made her father beam with pride now barely turned in assignments. Her piano sat untouched, her art supplies gathered dust, and the light that once shone so brightly in her eyes dimmed to a barely visible flicker. As autumn turned to winter, Olivia felt herself disappearing more each day, becoming as ghost-like as the memory of her father's morning, humming in their now silent home. Something had to change, but she didn't know what or how, or if she even had the strength to try. Sarah Chen stood in her daughter's doorway early one Saturday morning, holding a glossy brochure in her hands. Olivia lay in bed, as she had most weekends since her father's passing, surrounded by unwashed clothes and half-finished homework assignments. The room that once sparkled with artwork and music posters now felt as gray as Seattle's winter sky. "We need to talk," Sarah said, her voice firmer than usual. She picked her way through the messy room and sat on the edge of Olivia's bed. "I've made a decision about your future." Olivia pulled her blanket tighter, not wanting to hear whatever her mother had planned. These days, they barely spoke beyond basic greetings and necessary questions about meals. But something in her mother's tone made her sit up and pay attention. "I've enrolled you in Crestwood Academy," Sarah announced, holding out the brochure. "It's a boarding school in Vermont. They have one of the best arts programs in the country." The words hit Olivia like a bucket of ice water. "You're sending me away?" Her voice cracked. 3,000 miles away. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she smoothed the brochure. "I've watched you disappear these past 3 months, Olivia. You don't eat, you don't play music anymore, your grades are falling. I can't." She took a deep breath. "I can't lose you too." Olivia jumped out of bed, anger finally breaking through her months of numbness. "So your solution is to ship me off to the other side of the country, away from everything Dad loved?" "Your father," Sarah said quietly, "would want you to live, not just exist. Crestwood has everything: music rooms, art studios, performance spaces. Things I can't give you here." But Olivia wasn't listening anymore. She stormed around her room, grabbing items randomly and throwing them. "I won't go. You can't make me leave his piano, his music room, his." "The piano you haven't touched in months?" Sarah interrupted, standing up. "The music room you keep locked? Olivia, you're drowning here. We both are." Tears streamed down Olivia's face as she collapsed onto her desk chair. Why can't things just stay the same? Sarah knelt beside her daughter, something she hadn't done since Olivia was small. "Because they already changed, sweetheart. When we lost him." She wiped Olivia's tears with her thumb, just like David used to do. "Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is start over." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparations. Despite Olivia's protests, Sarah remained firm. Forms were filled out, uniforms were ordered, and boxes were packed. Jenny cried when Olivia told her the news, promising to text every day. Mr. Parker, her art teacher, gave her a new set of professional sketching pencils, telling her that Crestwood's art studios were legendary. On her last night in Seattle, Olivia finally found the courage to enter the music room. She sat at her father's piano, running her fingers over the keys without pressing them. The room still smelled faintly of his cologne. Opening the piano bench, she found the stack of sheet music he'd been saving to teach her. On top was Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, with his handwritten notes in the margins. She carefully packed it in her carry-on bag. The morning of departure arrived cold and foggy. Sarah drove Olivia to Seattle Tacoma International Airport, the car loaded with suitcases and boxes to be shipped later. Neither spoke much during the drive, both lost in their own thoughts. At the security checkpoint, Sarah hugged Olivia tightly. "Your father would be so proud of you," she whispered. "You're stronger than you know." Olivia couldn't speak, her throat too tight with tears. She simply nodded and turned away, walking through security without looking back. But at the gate, she pulled out her phone and sent her mother a text. "I love you too." As the plane took off, Olivia watched Seattle disappear beneath the clouds. In her lap, she clutched her father's old coffee mug, carefully wrapped in bubble wrap. The chipped blue ceramic with music notes was the one piece of home she couldn't bear to pack in boxes. Somewhere between Seattle and Vermont, between the familiar and unknown, between her old life and whatever waited at Crestwood Academy, Olivia Chen closed her eyes and tried to imagine what starting over might feel like. For the first time in months, she felt something besides grief. A tiny spark of fear mixed with something that might have been hope. Crestwood Academy looked exactly like its brochure, a sprawling campus of red brick buildings with white columns, nestled in the Green Mountains of Vermont. But to Olivia Chen, dragging her suitcase up the stone steps of Thompson Hall, it felt more like a prison than a prestigious boarding school. "Room 304, room 304, she muttered, climbing the stairs. The dormitory hallway buzzed with activity as other students moved in, their excited voices and laughter bouncing off the walls. Olivia kept her head down, counting door numbers until she reached her room. She had barely turned the key when the door flew open, revealing a tall girl with dark curly hair and the brightest smile Olivia had ever seen. "Oh my gosh, you must be Olivia," the girl squealed. "I'm Riley Martinez, your roommate. I've been dying to meet you." Riley's energy filled their small dorm room like sunshine. She had already decorated her side with dance posters, fairy lights, and photos of what looked like a huge, happy family in New Orleans. Olivia's side remained bare as she unpacked, placing her father's coffee mug on the windowsill, the only personal touch she allowed herself. "Is that your dad?" Riley asked, pointing to the photo Olivia had just placed next to the mug. It showed Olivia and her father at the piano, both laughing at something now forgotten. Olivia corrected quietly, turning away. "He died 3 months ago." The room fell silent. Riley's smile faded, replaced by genuine concern. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. But unlike others who'd said those words, Riley didn't follow up with awkward questions or forced sympathy. Instead, she simply asked, "Want help unpacking?" Classes started the next day. Olivia's schedule was filled with advanced placement courses, plus art and music classes she hadn't chosen. She sat in the back of every class, taking notes mechanically and speaking only when called on. Her teacher's encouraging smiles bounced off the invisible wall she built around herself. In the cafeteria, Riley always waved her over to a table full of dancers and musicians. Olivia would sit quietly, pushing food around her plate while the others chatted about upcoming auditions and performances. She ignored their friendly attempts to include her in conversations. "The fall showcase auditions are next week," Riley mentioned one evening as they did homework. "I heard you play piano. You should totally try out." Olivia's pencil stopped moving. "I don't play anymore." But that night, unable to sleep, Olivia found herself wandering the empty halls until she discovered the music building. Following the numbered signs, she located practice room 7, the one assigned to her during orientation. Inside sat a beautiful grand piano, its black surface reflecting the moonlight from the window. Her fingers traced the keys, not pressing down, just like that last night in Seattle. From her bag, she pulled out the sheet music of Moonlight Sonata, her father's notes still visible in the margins. For a moment, she considered playing, but the thought of music without him hurt too much. She locked the practice room and ran back to her dorm. Riley was awake when she returned, sitting up in bed with a worried expression. "Bad dream?" she asked. "Something like that," Olivia mumbled, climbing into bed. But sleep wouldn't come. Hours later, she heard Riley's soft voice in the darkness. "You know, when my abuela died 2 years ago, I stopped dancing for months," Riley said quietly. "It felt wrong to do something I loved when she wasn't there to see it." Olivia lay still, pretending to be asleep, but Riley continued. "But then I realized she'd hate seeing me give up what made me happy. Sometimes honoring someone means keeping their joy alive." Tears slid silently down Olivia's cheeks as she faced the wall. That night, for the first time since arriving at Crestwood, she cried herself to sleep. But unlike the lonely nights in Seattle, someone heard her muffled sobs. Without a word, Riley crossed the room and sat on the floor next to Olivia's bed, humming softly until her roommate's tears subsided. The wall Olivia had built remained standing, but that night, the smallest crack appeared in its foundation. She still wasn't ready to let anyone in, but maybe, just maybe, she was tired of being so alone. The mandatory student concert fell on a cloudy October evening. Olivia sat in the back row of Crestwood's grand auditorium, arms crossed, watching other students file in. Riley had saved her a seat, though Olivia would have preferred to stand near the exit. "Next up," announced the concert director, "Thomas Lee performing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major." Olivia's heart stopped. The world around her suddenly felt too small, too tight. That piece, it was the last one her father had taught her, the one they practiced together on lazy Sunday afternoons. She could still hear his voice. "Feel the music, live, let it breathe through you." As the first notes filled the auditorium, Olivia couldn't breathe. Her hands started shaking. Without thinking, she jumped up from her seat and rushed out, ignoring Riley's concerned whisper. She ran through the empty hallways, her footsteps echoing against the wooden floors, not knowing where she was going until she found herself outside the art building. The door was unlocked. Inside, the art studio smelled of paint and clay, familiar smells that somehow made it easier to breathe. Moonlight streamed through the large windows, casting strange shadows on the easels and half-finished paintings. Olivia collapsed onto a stool, her whole body trembling. "The art room is always open to those who need it," a gentle voice said. Olivia spun around to find Ms. Harrison, the art teacher, sitting in the corner. The older woman was working on a painting, her gray hair tied back with a colorful scarf. Olivia had seen her in class but had never spoken more than necessary. "I'm sorry," Olivia stammered, standing up. I didn't know anyone was here. I'll leave. Stay, Miss Harrison said simply, not looking up from her work. Art studios are good places for healing hearts. Something in her voice made Olivia sink back onto the stool. They sat in silence as minutes ticked by, the only sound being Miss Harrison's brush against canvas. I was 17 when I lost my mother, Miss Harrison said quietly, still painting. Cancer. I used to run to the art room at my school too. Some days, colors spoke better than words. Olivia watched as moonlight danced across the empty canvas in front of her. Without thinking, she reached for a nearby charcoal pencil. Her hand moved on its own, making rough, angry strokes across the white surface. That's it, Miss Harrison murmured. Let it out. The charcoal scratched and smudged as Olivia's movements grew more intense. Tears fell onto the paper, creating dark spots where they landed. Slowly, a shape emerged. The shadow of a piano, broken and twisted, with music notes scattered like leaves in a storm. Ms. Harrison silently placed more paper and different charcoal sticks next to Olivia. Hours passed. The moon moved across the sky as Olivia filled canvas after canvas with dark, swirling images. Her father's coffee mug shattering, hands reaching through darkness, a bird with broken wings trying to fly. When the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, Olivia finally put down her charcoal. Her hands were black with dust, and her cheeks were streaked with tears she hadn't realized she'd been crying. Art has a way of showing us what we can't say, Ms. Harrison said, looking at Olivia's drawings. These are powerful pieces, Olivia. They speak of great love and great loss. Olivia stared at her work spread across the table. Each drawing was raw and messy, but somehow they captured exactly how she felt inside. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't know I had this in me. We all have storms inside us, Ms. Harrison said, standing up. The trick is finding a way to let them out before they drown us. She walked to the supply closet and returned with a new sketchbook and a complete set of charcoal pencils. The studio is always open, Olivia, and my office is just down the hall. As Olivia gathered her drawings, she noticed Ms. Harrison's painting. It showed a woman sitting at a hospital bedside, holding someone's hand. The love and pain in the image were palpable. Thank you, Olivia said softly, really looking at her teacher for the first time. For letting me stay, for understanding. Ms. Harrison smiled gently. Sometimes the best thing we can do for each other is simply hold space for the pain. Now go get some rest, but come back tomorrow. These walls have seen many healing hearts, and they always have room for one more. The annual Crestwood Arts Festival announcement hung on every bulletin board across campus. Students gathered around, buzzing with excitement about the biggest event of the year. Olivia walked past them, clutching her new sketchbook, heading toward the art studio that had become her sanctuary over the past few weeks. Olivia, wait up. Ms. Harrison called out, catching up to her in the hallway. I need to talk to you about something important. Inside her office, Ms. Harrison pulled out a festival application form. I've seen your work developing these past weeks. I think you should enter the arts festival. Olivia's stomach tightened. I don't think I'm ready for that. You are, Ms. Harrison said firmly, spreading out some of Olivia's recent drawings. Look at these pieces, the way you combine music and visual elements. It's unique. Different from anything I've seen at Crestwood before. Olivia looked at her work scattered across the desk. Since that first night in the studio, she'd filled almost 2 sketchbooks. Her latest pieces showed pianos transforming into birds, musical notes becoming butterflies, and instruments growing like trees from the earth. The festival has a special category for multimedia projects, Ms. Harrison continued. You could combine your art with music, create something that tells your whole story. I haven't touched a piano in months, Olivia whispered, but her fingers twitched at the thought. Then maybe it's time, Ms. Harrison said gently. Your father's music doesn't have to stay locked away forever. That evening, Olivia sat in practice room 7, staring at the piano keys. Riley had brought her dinner, sitting quietly in the corner, working on her dance routine for the festival. You know, Riley said casually, I could help you set up the visual elements if you decide to do it. My dad works in theater, I know all about projectors and lighting. Olivia pressed one key, then another. The notes hung in the air like old friends waiting to be welcomed back. She reached into her bag and pulled out her father's copy of Moonlight Sonata. I need to write my own piece, she said quietly. Something new. Riley's face lit up. Is that a yes? For the next 2 weeks, Olivia lived between the art studio and the practice room. During the day, she worked on large-scale paintings that would be photographed and projected. At night, she composed at the piano, turning her grief into melody. Other students started dropping by to help. Riley organized the technical setup, while her friend Marcus from the tech club figured out how to sync the music with the projected images. Even Jenny from Seattle sent encouraging texts every day. It's like a journey, Olivia explained to Ms. Harrison, showing her the storyboard. The music starts dark and heavy, like grief, but slowly transforms. The projections will change with the music, from darkness to light, from broken things becoming whole again. But 1 week before the festival, Olivia hit a wall. The final section of her composition wouldn't come together. She sat at the piano for hours, playing the same passage over and over, growing more frustrated each time. It's not right, she cried, slamming her hands on the keys. Dad would know how to fix this. He always knew. Riley, who had been napping on a practice room chair, woke up. What would he tell you to do? Olivia closed her eyes, remembering. He'd say, "Step away, clear your head. The music will come when it's ready." "Then that's what we'll do," Riley declared. She grabbed Olivia's hand and dragged her outside. The autumn air was crisp, and the Vermont mountains blazed with fall colors. They walked in silence until they reached a small hill overlooking the campus. Sitting on the grass, Olivia noticed how the wind made the trees sway, creating a natural rhythm. She pulled out her phone and recorded the sound. That night, she incorporated the whisper of wind into her composition. The piece finally felt complete, a symphony of nature, grief, healing, and hope. "I think I'm ready," she told Miss Harrison the next day, playing through the entire piece for the first time. "It's not perfect, but it's honest." Miss Harrison finished. And that's more important than perfect. As Olivia gathered her things to leave, she caught her reflection in the window. For the first time in months, the girl looking back at her had a spark in her eyes. The same spark her father had always loved to see when she played. 2 weeks before the arts festival, Olivia sat cross-legged on her dorm room floor, surrounded by sketches and music sheets. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call from her mother. Smiling, she answered, eager to share her progress. "Mom, guess what? The rehearsal went great today. The projections are working perfectly with the music and..." "Olivia, sweetheart." Sarah's voice sounded strained. "I need to tell you something." The tone in her mother's voice made Olivia's stomach drop. "What's wrong?" I won't be able to make it to your performance." Sarah's words came out in a rush. "The Martinez case just got moved up. It's a major trial, and I'm the lead attorney. I tried everything to change the date, but..." The phone slipped from Olivia's hand, clattering to the floor. The room suddenly felt too small, too hot. Without thinking, she ran out, leaving her mother's voice calling from the dropped phone. Her feet carried her to the art studio, but her hands were shaking too much to hold a pencil. Instead, she grabbed her largest canvas, a centerpiece of her festival project, and stared at it. The painting showed a piano transforming into a flock of birds, each key becoming a wing in flight. "No," she whispered, picking up a jar of black paint. "No, no, no." The jar flew across the canvas, black paint splattering across months of work. Olivia grabbed another jar, then another, hurling them at the painting. Colors ran together, destroying the careful details she'd spent weeks creating. That's how Riley found her 20 minutes later, sitting in a pool of spilled paint, surrounded by the ruins of her artwork. "Olivia." Riley rushed in, carefully stepping around the paint puddles. "What happened?" "She's not coming," Olivia choked out. "Just like she's never home. Just like she's always working. Even for this, she can't." Her voice broke into sobs. Riley sat down next to her friend, not caring about the paint staining her dance clothes. For a long time, they sat in silence until Olivia's sobs quieted. "You know what?" Riley said finally, looking at the paint-splattered canvas. "This actually looks kind of amazing." Olivia blinked through her tears. The random splashes of paint had created unexpected patterns across her original work. Where the piano had been precise and controlled before, it now looked wild, emotional, real. "It's like what you've been trying to say all along," Riley continued. about how grief changes everything, makes it messy. But maybe that's okay. A small crowd had gathered at the studio door, other students who'd heard the commotion. Marcus from Tech Club stepped forward. "We can help you remake the other pieces if you want. There's still time." "Or," said Emma from art class, "we could do something with this new style. Make all the paintings match this energy." One by one, students entered the studio, picking up brushes and paint. Someone connected their phone to a speaker, playing soft music. Riley started organizing people into teams. They worked through the night. What began as destruction transformed into creation. Where Olivia had planned careful, controlled paintings, now emerged powerful, emotional pieces. Her friends helped her splatter paint, create random patterns, and find beauty in the chaos. Ms. Harrison appeared around midnight with hot chocolate and cookies. She took one look at the new direction of the artwork and smiled. "Now you're not just showing your journey," she said. "You're showing your truth." As dawn approached, Olivia sat at a clean workbench, writing a letter to her mother. "Mom, I understand about the trial, I really do. But I need you to understand something too. This performance isn't just about art or music, it's about Dad, about us. About everything that broke and everything that's healing. I love you, even when it's hard. Even when we're both too busy being strong to be honest with each other." She paused, then added, "P.S. Riley recorded the rehearsal. I'll send you the video. Maybe we can watch it together next time I'm home." Looking around the studio at her paint-covered friends, sleeping on chairs and benches, Olivia realized something. The night's destruction hadn't ruined her project. It had made it real. Just like her grief hadn't ruined her life, but was reshaping it into something different, something honest, something true. She picked up a clean brush and began to work on a new piece, this one starting with chaos and slowly finding its way to order. Behind her, the rising sun painted the studio windows gold, promising a new day. The night of the Arts Festival arrived crisp and clear. Backstage at Crestwood's main auditorium, Olivia paced nervously, her black performance dress swishing with each step. Around her, students rushed back and forth, making final adjustments to the equipment. 5 minutes. Marcus called out, checking the projector settings one last time. The huge white screens hung perfectly positioned above the grand piano on stage. Riley ran through the lighting cues with the tech team, her clipboard covered in colorful notes. Olivia's phone buzzed. A text from her mother. In a taxi from the airport. "Be there soon. Love you." Her hands trembled as she read it again. After their emotional phone conversation last week, Sarah had somehow managed to reschedule the trial's opening arguments. "Olivia Chen, you're up next," the stage manager announced. Taking a deep breath, Olivia pulled out her father's old coffee mug from her bag. She'd started keeping it with her during rehearsals, a small piece of him watching over her. She placed it carefully on the piano, next to where her music would sit. "Break a leg," Riley whispered, giving her a quick hug. "Your dad would be so proud." The audience fell silent as Olivia walked onto the stage. Under the bright lights, she could barely see the packed auditorium, but she felt hundreds of eyes watching her. She sat at the piano, adjusted her bench, and nodded to Marcus. The first image appeared on the screens, her original painting of the piano turning into birds, now transformed by that night of chaos into something raw and powerful. Olivia placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The piece started softly, with heavy, dark chords that spoke of loss and grief. Above her, the projected images shifted slowly, broken pianos, scattered music notes, shadows and storms. Her fingers moved with certainty now, each note carrying the weight of months of pain. As the music progressed, light began creeping into the melody. The projections changed too, showing her newer works where chaos and order danced together. Paint splattered across precise drawings, but within the splatter, new patterns emerged. Halfway through the performance, Olivia caught movement in the audience. Even through the stage lights, she recognized her mother slipping into a seat near the back, still wearing her business suit, clearly straight from the airport. The music swelled. Now her fingers flew across the keys as the piece built toward its climax. The themes of grief transformed into something else. Not happiness exactly, but acceptance, strength, hope. Above her, the final images bloomed. A piano made of stained glass, shattered but catching light through every broken piece. She wove in the sound of wind she'd recorded that day on the hill, letting it whisper between the notes. Then, in the final measures, she played the beginning of Chopin's Nocturne, her father's favorite piece, but transformed it, making it her own. The last note hung in the air as the final image faded. Her father's coffee mug, painted in bright colors, music notes rising from it like steam. For a moment, complete silence filled the auditorium. Then, like a wave, the applause began. People stood up, some wiping tears from their faces. Riley and the tech team rushed onto stage, enveloping Olivia in a group hug. But Olivia's eyes searched for only one person. She found her mother standing in the back, tears streaming down her face, clapping harder than anyone. Their eyes met across the distance, and in that moment, something broken between them began to heal. After the applause finally died down, after the hugs and congratulations from teachers and students, Olivia found herself alone with her mother in the quiet auditorium. "That was beautiful, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, holding her daughter close. "I felt him here, in every note." "I did too," Olivia said softly. I think he's been here all along. I just wasn't ready to feel it." They sat together in the empty auditorium, the ghost light casting soft shadows on the stage. Sarah reached out and touched the coffee mug still sitting on the piano. "Your father once told me," she said, "that music doesn't just express emotions, it transforms them. Tonight, watching you play, I finally understood what he meant." Olivia looked at her mother, really looked at her, and saw grief matched with pride, love mixed with regret, and most importantly, hope for tomorrow. Together, they walked out of the auditorium into the cool night air, carrying their shared loss a little lighter than before. Spring bloomed across Crestwood's campus, painting the grounds in bright colors that matched Olivia's newest artwork hanging in the school gallery. 6 months had passed since the arts festival, and everything had changed, including Olivia herself. Ms. Chen called out Mr. Roberts, the music department head, catching her after morning assembly. "Don't forget about the new student orientation tomorrow. They're especially excited to meet last semester's festival winner." Olivia smiled, adjusting the folder of sheet music under her arm. These days, she split her time between practicing for her own performances and helping younger students find their artistic voice. Her festival piece, Echoes of Love, had not only won the Innovation Award, but had also inspired the school to create a new program combining music and art therapy. In the art studio, her favorite spot remained by the window, but now she shared it with other students. Today, a freshman named Katie sat beside her, hands shaking as she tried to draw. "I don't know how to show it," Katie whispered, crumpling another failed sketch. "My grandfather died last month, and I just—" "Start with the feeling," Olivia said gently, pulling out her father's coffee mug, now permanently stationed on her art desk. "It doesn't have to be perfect, just honest." During lunch, Riley burst into the practice room where Olivia was composing. "You won't believe this," she exclaimed, waving her phone. "Remember that video of your festival performance? It just hit 100,000 views online." The video had gone viral in the arts education community, leading to interviews and articles about grief, creativity, and healing through art. Olivia had received messages from teenagers across the country, sharing their own stories of loss and recovery. After classes, Olivia led the weekly meeting of the Arts Healing Circle, a student group she'd founded with Riley's help. 20 students gathered in the studio, sharing their works in progress and supporting each other through their individual journeys. "Remember," Olivia told the group, "art isn't about perfection. It's about transformation. Sometimes the most beautiful pieces come from our deepest wounds." That evening, during her regular video call with her mother, Olivia shared exciting news. "The summer arts program accepted my proposal," she beamed. "I'll be teaching music and art to kids who've lost parents. Can you believe it?" Sarah's smile filled the screen. Their relationship had grown stronger since the festival night. They'd learned to talk about grief, about David, about everything they'd kept buried. Sarah had even started taking piano lessons, sending Olivia videos of her progress. "Your father would be amazed," Sarah said, "not just by what you've achieved, but by how many lives you're touching." Later that night, alone in practice room 7, Olivia played her father's favorite Chopin piece. But now, instead of bringing tears, the music brought warm memories. She'd learned that grief doesn't disappear, it transforms, like paint on canvas, like notes in a melody. A knock on the door interrupted her playing. Miss Harrison stood there, holding a large envelope. The National Young Artists Foundation sent this, she said, handing it to Olivia. They want to feature your work in their upcoming exhibition on art and healing. Olivia opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was an official invitation, along with photos of her festival pieces. Among them was her favorite, the spatter-painted piano turning into birds, the piece born from her darkest moment. You've started something important here, Olivia, Miss Harrison said softly. You've shown others that their broken pieces can become part of their strength. Looking around Practice Room 7, Olivia saw her journey reflected everywhere. In the pictures on the wall, in the stack of compositions on the piano, in the art supplies scattered across the windowsill. Each item told a story of transformation. That night, writing in her journal, Olivia found herself addressing her father. Dear Dad, remember how you always said that music could heal anything? You were right, but not in the way I thought. It doesn't take away the pain. It gives it somewhere to go, something to become. I'm not the same girl who arrived at Crestwood broken and scared. I'm someone new, someone stronger, someone who knows that grief and love can exist in the same song. I still miss you every day, but now I know that missing you doesn't mean I have to stop playing, stop creating, stop living. Instead, I learned to turn our love into something that helps others find their way through the dark. You once told me that every great piece of music tells a story. I think I finally understand mine. It's not just about loss, it's about transformation. And Dad, the music isn't finished yet, it's still becoming.